The next thing that we need is a random number. So we've got a message to the user, and the way that we usually build out the game is that we look at what's next. So the user comes in, they get a welcome message, we provide some instructions for the game, the input is there, the guess button is there, so they know what to do, what actions to take, and the next action is going to be to generate a random number, and then we need to create the interaction where we can pick up the input field value and have an event listener on the guess button, and then take that value and check it against the value that we've generated as our number value. So going into our JavaScript code, we're going to create a function in order to handle this. And this function will be random number function. And it's going to take in two parameters. It's going to have a minimum and a maximum value. And it's going to be returning back that minimum and maximum value as a random number. So using math floor. And the way that we usually do this is we either do math floor or math ceiling. So that gives us more control over what the number we're expecting. So math floor will bring it down to the nearest whole number. Math ceiling will bring it up to the nearest full number. And so if it's a 1.1, math floor will be 1. If it's 1.9, math floor will also be 1. And with math random, what gets returned with this math random function is a random number. So it starts at 0 and it's got decimal. So it will always be a different value, a different number. You see when we changed it, it gives us this big long number. So 0.222 and so on. And if we enter it again, we're going to get a different number. And the way that we use math random is we take this number and we multiply it. So we'll take math random and we multiply it by 20. So that's going to give us a whole number minus the decimal whatever is going to give us a random number times 20. So this is going to be actually a number from 0 decimal whatever all the way up to 19 decimal whatever. So that's why we use math floor, so it gives us more control, and we can make sure that with math floor, this math random number, and I'll just put in times 20 and show you what this formula returns back. So clearing that out and doing math floor, math 20, it's going to give us a random number. So it could be any random number, and we see that it's fluctuating, and it's anywhere from 0 to 20 because we're using math floor. And math ceiling will convert it to the ceiling, so that will bring it up. So we're using math floor in this case. So this is another part of the formula where we've got our max value subtracting our min value. So if our max value is 10, our min value is 1, that's going to give us a number of 9. And we also need to add +1. And when we add the minimum to it, that's going to ensure that we always return back at least the minimum value within this formula. So what's going to happen now is whenever we run this function, so let me clear this function out, and we run the function random number, it's expecting two parameters. So if we want a number from 1 to 5, we can see that we get a random number from 1 to 5. And these numbers are always going to fall anywhere from 1 to 5. We're not going to hit 0 because we added the minimum, and we're not going to go over 5 because we subtracted the minimum from the maximum and added 1. So that will always end up from a number from anywhere from 1 to 5. And now that we've got that in a function, we can utilize it whenever we want. And we want to make use of it when we're initiating the game, because this is where we're starting the gameplay and we're creating that number that needs to be guessed. We can add that into the game. We can just call it game num. So this is the number that the player is trying to guess. And it's taking in a value, returning back that random number. So just as we saw with the formula works, we need to pass in the minimum and the maximum. And the reason that I'm not just using the game minimum and maximum within the function here, we could just do not pass in any parameters, is that this is going to make that function more flexible. So if we need more randomness somewhere down the line within the game, if we're extending on it, this gives us the flexibility in order to utilize that same function with the minimum and maximum. And we can use that in any number of situations. Whereas if we hard-coded the game minimum and the game maximum, that's going to not provide us any of that flexibility. So now we're creating that game value. So saving this, and if I go into game, you're going to see that I've got all of the values, all of the variables that I'm using within the game and that I need within the game in order to produce the gameplay. So I've got a minimum, I've got a maximum, they're all flexible. I've got the number, random number that was generated, and I've got the ability to select all of the inputs that are available to the user. So go ahead and add in the ability to generate the random number, and you're going to be ready to move on to the next lesson.